We have a lot to cover tonight. We're going to start by talking with our friend Hal Kempfer. He's a national security analyst, retired Marine intelligence officer, and the host of the Strat podcast. Hal and I want to talk about the Gaza war, the Russia-Ukraine war. But first, I want to talk about something that The Economist has been writing about lately, Hal. Specifically, the Golden Dome. We're looking at file footage, if you will, of random missiles being fired and defense systems at work. We don't really have any visual representation of what the actual Golden Dome itself might look like. I want to make that clear. For anybody who's curious what the Golden Dome is, by the way, it's a proposed U.S. defense system intended to protect the homeland from missile threats of all kinds. The U.S. wants the Golden Dome to operate in space. It'll be maintained in Earth's orbit. Basically, you could think of it as something similar to Israel's Iron Dome, except on a larger scale. The Economist has been writing this week that it has some major questions about the project's cost, feasibility, timeline, and strategic implications. Hal, let's start with explaining why a Golden Dome is necessary. What will it be able to do that isn't possible today?
Well, what a Golden Dome does is really change our strategy, if you will. What it changes is right now we still operate under a broader concept called mutually assured destruction. It's been around, well, since the 60s or 70s, if you want to go back that far. The idea is if there is a launch by back at that time the Soviet Union and the U.S., that the thing that would hold us all back is that one would launch and both sides would get wiped out. And we have a triad system of ICBMs, ground launch missiles, intercontinental ballistic missiles, submarine launch ballistic missiles, and then, of course, bombers that would deliver nuclear weapons. And on all of these things would provide a counterweight, if you will, to a potential Soviet launch at that time. Now we have Russia, but we also have China is building up its inventory. Still not up there close to parity with the U.S. or Russia, but they are increasing fast. And then we have North Korea kind of throwing a monkey wrench in the whole thing because it's a very, it has a very unstable kind of rogue regime, and we're not quite sure about what they would or would not do. So the Golden Dome would change this math by putting up a defensive shield, kind of like the Iron Dome over Israel. The challenge for the U.S. is we're a heck of a lot bigger than Israel. We encompass, when you look at our air defense requirements, we encompass pretty much North America or most of North America. And it's not quite clear how this dome would work. In Israel, it's a very small geographical space, and their Iron Dome is mostly towards protecting, Israel, but also Israeli population centers, major critical infrastructure like the David Ben Gurion Airport and some other things. And even then, we have seen missiles, particularly from the Houthis, occasionally sneak in through that dome, if you will. So it's really not clear what this is. And then the space-based system, if you talk about doing stuff from space versus the ground, that's been talked about. I mean, that goes back to the Reagan era Star Wars concept. But to do something like that, we would have to put a tremendous amount of low Earth orbit satellites. And if they're low Earth orbit, it's a tremendous amount because then they're orbiting faster than the rotation of the Earth. They're not fixed in space. They're having to move very quickly around the Earth, orbiting very quickly in order to maintain enough of those satellites over North America to provide that shield. And then the fear is, well, would this open up a new era of anti-satellite attacks or anti-satellite capabilities in space? We're already seeing problems with that. In fact, the Chinese have three astronauts stuck on their space station because their capsule to come home got hit with space debris, and it's caused damage. So there's a lot of concerns that go into this, and that's kind of what the Economist article was pointing to is the technology. We're not sure exactly how this would work. And then there's other things where, you aim for space, but then you got, we look at ICBMs or large high trajectory ballistic missiles. but then we have a plethora of cruise missiles. The Russians just took an old Soviet design and uh, and did a nuclear powered cruise missile. So the fear is that if we develop a system to go against what's out there today, that there could be a leapfrog in technology that can make this a white elephant system, a very expensive white elephant system.
Yeah, this is an ambitious project. The Economist describes it like this. They say it'll likely involve building interceptors in space or near space. It'll involve tracking hypersonic threats and integrating all of this into a seamless shield. Is it fair to ask whether such a system is actually feasible? How the U.S. does have a reputation of pushing boundaries and figuring things out.
We do, and I actually think this is feasible that they could do something like this. It's going to be a phenomenal cost. The 25 billion has already been allocated by Congress for this already. Although we have a bit of a budget impasse right now, the cost projection that's put out is 175 billion, but there are estimates I've seen that are like 2 to 3 times that high. Could be over $500 billion or more. Of course, it's a very ambitious project, but when you look at cruise missiles, you look at long-range drones, you look at various submarine launched ballistic missiles and other things, and then also keep in mind that the intercept time frame could be very short. If there's a submarine launching cruise missiles right off our shore, those missiles are flying very low. They're right off our shore, so they could be coming in, and hitting within minutes of a major urban center, and that cuts our response time way down. So instead of that classic scenario where we have 18 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever to look at a launch from overseas, we could be looking at something where by the time we detect it, that nuclear warhead is almost over one of our major urban areas. And of course it's a tracking it, hitting it. All of these things are very, very difficult technical solutions, and so there's a lot of concern that we're kind of rushing into this thing, but we haven't figured out all these concepts. And some of the concepts we're talking about, for example, some of these energy based beam systems, laser systems have been talked about as well. These things have not really been fully developed. So some of the concepts in there are cutting edge science that isn't really done yet.
If we build a golden dome, does that mean that adversaries are going to have to build countermeasures, counter space measures, perhaps?
That is a fear, and that's what the Economist kind of brings out, which is we could have a new arms race, if you will, kind of like in the in the 70s, 60s, where we're building arms as quickly as possible, and basically what's happening is because of our dome system, if it's reliant on satellites, our opponents simply go towards a heavy anti-satellite program, which threatens not only the defensive system but every satellite that we have up there. And of course, if it's employed, then the problem is you could literally just, and this has been talked about a lot, clutter the orbit of the Earth with a bunch of space debris, making it very difficult, if not impossible, to put anything up there again without it getting hit with space debris. And then keep in mind that sometimes this debris is moving around the planet at very fast speed, 16,000 miles an hour. A little piece of debris hitting a spaceship at that speed with that much kinetic energy can cause a lot of damage. So there's a lot of concerns about where this is going, and are we maybe getting ahead of ourselves? And it changes the whole dynamic of the strategic deterrence package that we have globally.
Elon Musk is kind of getting worked into this conversation, and SpaceX, to be more specific, is getting worked into this conversation because about a week ago, the Wall Street Journal said that Musk's SpaceX is set to win a $2 billion Pentagon satellite deal. Is it still unclear who would build the Golden Dome, Hal, and is Elon Musk and SpaceX a prime candidate to do it?
Austin, SpaceX has tremendous capabilities, and I can't see any way that they would not be a prime candidate for parts of this program. If nothing else, the lift capability that they bring to put that many satellites up in space. And you have to remember, they have done things with satellites using strings of satellites in space that nobody else had done before. And so they have tremendous capabilities to do all sorts of things that other firms just simply cannot provide. But with that said, one of the things that's been talked about with Golden Dome is there's going to be new entrants, if you will. Not, I don't want to say necessarily startups per se, but new companies that are not your traditional major defense contractors. There are going to be new companies, and I look at companies like Anduril that's developing all sorts of drone systems, particularly for sea, maritime usage, and they bring a whole different way of looking at this. And I see that definitely being something that might be incorporated into this. This thing may start out one direction, and because of the rapid shifts in technology, and particularly with artificial intelligence, it may actually take a pivot or a turn or a signal, I should say, direction change halfway through, and that's because the technology and the threat picture will change so dramatically in the years hence.
Hal and I have a lot to discuss tonight, including the latest on the Russia-Ukraine war. That's something we're going to discuss in about 2 minutes. First, we have to take a commercial break. Hal and I will be right back in a moment.